Welcome to the Care Right podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of Care Right Incorporated, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the Care Right podcast.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annalee Kruger. I'm the owner of Care Right Incorporated. We work with families all across the country in developing customized aging plans and facilitating their family meetings to just make sure that if you have aging loved ones or you find yourself in that family caregiver role, that you don't get burned out and that you and your family have enough supports in place, whether it's home care or looking down the road at, what does long-term care look like and how much does that cost and how are you going to pay for that? And just, helping families all across the country navigate the what whens of aging, of caregiving, of dementia, progression, end of life, and making sure that through our grab and go binder process that you have your documents in order and that they're updated and that you don't have any gaps in your planning for yourselves or your aging parents. So on our Caregiver Crisis podcast, we always have exciting guests who are doing incredible work and who have dedicated their life to educating families and making sure that our families across the country have the best possible outcomes in whatever our guest specializes in. So today I'm excited because I have Jae Oh as a podcast guest, and he is a Medicare specialist. So as you know, if you are a regular listener, we keep these podcasts down to about 20 minutes and give you kind of the down and dirty. And then if you have questions or want to reach out to learn more information, then you can always reach out to either me directly through carerightinc.com website, or you can reach out to the guest directly if that's the better fit for you. So without further ado, Jae, welcome to the podcast today. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me today, Annalee. So like you rightly pointed out, I am a Medicare specialist. It is one of many things that I do as certified financial planner. I'm the author of Maximize Your Medicare. It's a published book. Very flattered, ChatGPT and Perplexity now refer to it amongst top resources on Medicare. And today, what I do love to explain with your audience is the idea of healthcare cost planning, a very, very misunderstood, mishandled aspect, something that just comes to become very apparent under crisis. Similar to you, Annalee, I'm sure you can relate, which is that you people do not think through the implications, the ramifications. But the reality is, and the reason I wrote Maximize Your Medicare is because the options, the rights that consumers have are overwhelmingly in the consumer's favor, overwhelmingly, if they understand all the nuances, and there are many.
And that's so, the big word is if.
Love today's opportunity to speak with your audience today, Annalee.
Excellent. Yeah, and the key word you just said was if they understand. And I'm here to tell you that, most of the families that we work with Care Right, unfortunately, by the time they find us or get referred to Care Right for an aging plan, it's more actually crisis management. And they have, 18 things going on, caregiver burnout, dad maybe just had a stroke, or mom, the primary caregiver, just died because she was burned out as a caregiver because they didn't have an aging plan. And then they realized they didn't have their, they didn't realize that they didn't have their funeral arrangements taken care of or their estate documents. And Medicare, and I can tell you, Medicare never gets considered when they go through this journey on their own, because they're thinking about all these other big things when Medicare is also a big thing. It's just families or consumers don't always realize that because they don't know what they don't know.
It's tough. And one of the challenges to Medicare from the ground up is the fact that the language may look similar to a plan you purchased through the Affordable Care Act or received from your employer. The language may look similar. However, Medicare works differently. So you gloss over the terminology that you may think, oh, I understand that term because it's in my employer-sponsored plan. But the reality is they work differently under Medicare. Now, that's not necessarily negative. The price is lower on average. The out-of-pocket maximums far lower on average. So it's not that. It is that people are confused about the usage of all the language and things like that. So today, love to shed some light on that, and then also to encourage those families to put their own house in order, meaning that, like you rightly pointed out, I've experienced this as well as certified financial planner, which is that the caregiver can predecease the original patient due to the stress, the overwhelming number of responsibilities that person has. And then you have all of these other jigsaw puzzle pieces to not only their parents or the person who there is being taken care of, but their own house. They realize, oh, I don't have those things in place. The very things that you're helping your clients try to sort out, sift through, filter. But then when they look at themselves in the mirror, and that is absolutely part of the second message that, so eager to share with your audience today.
Excellent. So where would you like to start? Because there's quite a bit to try to cover today, and I'll let you take lead on which topics you think are the most beneficial in the time that we have today.
So first of all, for existing people on Medicare, for people who are on Medicare today. And for example, you've convened with your service at CareRight that someone has taken the responsibility to convene the kind of session. We need this, Annalee's services. You have an original patient. It is important to actually understand what your parent, if let's just call it a parent in this example, your elderly parent, what their actual setup is. It's the very, in other words, people are looking through, does my mother or father have a will? Do they have a trust? Where are their brokerage statements? In that same way, we need to know precisely what plans, what you have on top of the federal Medicare card. From there, people can reach out to us. They can reach out to yourselves, Annalee, and we can, and as I've agreed to work with your group, but to have a very good assessment of facts so that you can know, then they take your Annalee's CareRight's other services, touring skilled nursing facilities or assisted living facilities, et cetera, and using your checklist. One of those is, how are they going to handle Medicare? What treatment are they going to get at what price within resources? The caregivers are going to have so many balls to juggle. One of them is going to be financial, just as a practical matter. What can they afford? What resources? What is the total cost for healthcare services to take care of the patient, the patient that they're using that requires this kind of caregiving services? So that's number one. And I think it's always my first stop. So that's definitely one of those, here's your inventory list, Annalee. I'm probably already saying what's obvious to Annalee for sure, but just to emphasize the point, I can certainly help people understand their setup. Once I see the cards, once I see prices, and then I can give an objective assessment from that spot. The same thing can be said about themselves. I can't stress this, more strongly, which is that the interaction between health insurance for yourself, whether it comes from your employer, whether you're having to purchase individually, the financial impact to yourself, taking care of yourself so that you can be a caregiver, so vital, so vital. And that has to do with not only just the pure financial, but also the peace of mind about worrying. If that happens to my mother, if what has happened to my mother, if I got ill like that, what are my ramifications to my life, so that I can take care of and people who are in the caregiver spot are usually interacting with multiple generations. And so now the cog starts spinning in your brain and can be very, very stressful, because you realize, oh, I don't know a single thing about how I'm set up for myself, my children, my spouse, etc.
Well,
So
and I can share too that, because part of what we do is facilitate family meetings, and part of that, the family meetings is education, because unfortunately most, they don't know what they don't know. And unfortunately, most families come to us just very misinformed. So when we start talking about, well, to avoid caregiver burnout for your mom, we need to get some home care in there. This is what it's going to look like. This is how home care works. This is what they can do. This is how much it costs. Or mom needs to look at moving into a care community, and then we help them with those different kind of care options too. But 9 times out of 10, they all think that Medicare or some other insurance that they don't have is going to cover the cost of home care. So their eyes get like this big when we're doing these family meetings, because they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't know that. We just assumed Medicare is going to cover stuff. So, and it does not. It's not set up that way. It's, if you want that type of coverage, you should have got long-term care insurance. So otherwise you're going to have to end up paying out of pocket, private pay, or if there's veteran, benefits that can be leveraged. But too many times families just assume that Medicare is going to pay for everything, and that's just not true.
It's such an important point. And in addition to that, it's not all negative. I don't want to leave as if this is a situation where adjustments cannot be made.
Right.
For example, there are going to be some big changes coming to Medicare in the near future as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act. My book is being revised now for the next edition to incorporate them. For example, prescription drug cost starting in 2025. There's going to be so many moving parts on pharmaceutical distribution, but the reality is the out-of-pocket there's going to be an out-of-pocket maximum set at $2,000 a year. This is a multiple $1,000 a year savings for many, many families where someone is on Medicare, for every year that person is going to still be with us. And hopefully that's a long time, but you can understand today that number is the maximum you can spend is easily over $10,000 a year in particular cases. But now you're going to have this $2,000 cap. So I don't want to say that it's all negative. There are just two motherhood things that in the interest of time. First of all, is that depending on the financial situation of the person who requires caregiving, there are financial assistance programs for original Medicare as well as prescription drug coverage. But as anything, it depends on what other structures, what other components to a financial plan exist. And then the second thing is, if not Medicare eligible, there's the Affordable Care Act has tremendous discounts on premium, as well as improvements to deductibles, out-of-pocket maximum, but these are tax credits. And by tax credits, the implication is financial planning is required, because tax credit depends on income, not resources, but actual income. So as a result, the ripple effects to other disciplines that people have believed were unrelated are actually very, very closely related. I've introduced how many other different topics here
Right.
just in a few moments. And
Yeah.
so I encourage when people are reaching out, Anna Lee, you're, I'm sure, directing traffic a lot, that the people that you interact with and your clients interact with have command of these interactions, or sense that their radar is on high,
Yeah.
because these financial differences are not small. It is entirely possible a 64-year-old person prior to Medicare has the health insurance they require at 80–90% lower than the printed sticker price as a result of these tax credits that I've just mentioned. So I don't want to be as if this Chicken Little, that the world is going to end tomorrow.
Right. And I think for, for a lot of my clients, because my clients range from like the young and vibrant, so like the still very
Sure.
active seniors who are still golfing and traveling and all of that. But they just like having that advocacy call every month to say, okay, John, how are you doing this month? Have you had any changes with your health or your falling or anything like that? But then my other kind of population of our clients are the frail elderly. They have dementia, they have chronic disease. And so a lot of them get different medications, or they have cancer now. And so now those types of medications, or they are leaving their home to move into a nursing home. And as you know, depending on what kind of Medicare carrier you have, not all facilities contract with all Medicare carriers. So sometimes we have to change Medicare carriers, because if the husband is already in the nursing home and the wife now needs to go, and that the wife doesn't have the kind of Medicare coverage that this facility accepts, she's going to have to change if she wants to go into the same nursing home as her husband. And that's what we end up doing, right? Or a lot of our clients, because everybody lives across the country, mom and dad might live in Tucson, Arizona, but now that they're needing more care and the family needs to be, stepping in much, much more, they'll say, you know what, we need to be looking at moving mom up to Ohio or wherever it is that the kids live.
Sure.
And then that triggers another, Medicare. And a lot of families, because again, they're coming to us and they're coming to Care Right in crisis, they don't know that there's like this whole checklist that has to be done. And that's why they work with us, is because that way we can just work our way through the checklist and make sure that they have everything that they need buttoned up, and that they've considered everything, and that we've connected them, that Care Right has connected them with that right referral source that can help them. And so those are things, that families just, they don't know what they don't know, because they haven't been through this, most likely. And so they don't think about that whole Medicare coverage until they have to. And so it's really important to just know what coverage you have. Is it still the right fit? Does it work for what your current needs are? And that's why I have you on today, to if you have any questions about your coverage and what that looks like, or if you've had any kind of those events that I just talked about, where a loved one is in a state of, living arrangements or healthcare changes and transitions, Jay can help you sort out what plan is going to make the most sense for what your new needs are going to be.
I'm very empathetic, just as I started today, which is that it's especially difficult because the mechanics are all different compared to the health insurance you purchase when you're 45 for yourself. Let's say you're self-employed. Let's say you are, even if you're the employee of a large business, you have not had to have the responsibility to learn what health insurance is, how it works, how the prices are set, none of it. So you've got this huge learning curve.
Right.
And then on top of that, Medicare is then slightly different than, for example, your neighbor who has just purchased individual health insurance.
Right. And so that brings up a really good point, because sometimes people are like, well, my neighbor, Henry, this is what he did, and I'm going to just do what he did. Well, maybe Henry's situation is entirely different than yours, so I find that sometimes because families don't know where to turn. They don't know where to go, and you don't, Google will only get you so far. And these websites, like the Medicare website and the insurance websites I mean, I'm techie enough, not like a tech wizard, but they're complicated for the average consumer to figure out and do it right. So if you want to do things right, you need to work with a professional who does this for a living. And this is, one of the value propositions of CareRight is we have these people in our network, so that if there's a guest on our podcast that this is the item that, this is the topic that you need to learn more about, or make sure that you're on the right track with, in this case, your Medicare and your insurance, that's why we have our types of guests that we do, so that we've got a resource that's right here that we've already vetted for you.
There's no doubt. And the issue is the landscape is going to be changing.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back on and just do a down and dirty what's different with Medicare now, because the more that, in my line of work, people make really poor mistakes because they don't know what they don't know, because they're not educated, and there's too much for them to educate themselves on, because they're educated on caregiving and dementia and end of life. It's just
Sure.
too much for them to where this is what we do for a living. So we can take a family and be like, oh, this is what needs to be done, and this is how we're going to do it, because we can guide them, and that's what you do as well. So if there's not that learning curve of wasted time, because again, most of my clients are in crisis mode, they don't have the luxury of time now. They've waited too long, or they didn't get the referral until it's, until they're in total crisis mode. So big decisions have to be made quickly, and let's make the right decision. Even though you're in crisis, let's make the right decision. Otherwise, there's going to be significant ramifications if you don't.
Absolutely. And the fact is that, there's a lot of distrust of, for example, insurance companies.
Yeah.
There's not a day goes by where you won't see a negative hot take in the press, and certainly at a social gathering. The reality is that the carriers, they are supervised by the federal government and the state. And the last thing, especially on Medicare, and just to leave your audience with this idea, which is they are not violating rules intentionally because of the fact that would jeopardize their likelihood of being in business the next year.
Yeah.
Their next year, 2024, is going to be the year that more people will turn 65 than any other year in US history. And so the idea that the carriers are going to simply I'm not going to provide the benefits that I said. No, that's literally most likely, overwhelmingly likely, is that there could have been a misunderstanding about what coverage you actually have, or there can be red tape and administrative error at the healthcare provider or communication across all of the different parties.
Yep.
I just want people to leave people with the impression, the message that it's easy, convenient, and our society that we want to throw mud at the first identifiable large party to try to resist that.
Yeah.
Because that's just not likely. And the fact is that if people use their common sense and say, okay, if I just erased the name insurance company, erased the broker, erased, etc., and said, this company has to have approval to survive and move on to next year, is it likely they are violating huge federal and state regulations? It's just not practical reality. So in other words, there had to be another reason. So let's go find that other reason, so that you are not living with this feel of just that everyone's against you under duress, which make it even more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And two things before we close down is, and this is just my business model, because we are a white glove approach concierge, for those that want that level of service. Otherwise, we have the do-it-yourself, aging guide and aging packages and stuff like that. But one thing I always caution families is, when during open enrollment, you're just bombarded by these
Sure.
commercials, right? And when there's elderly people who they're not, they're isolated at home, they're sitting in their recliner watching TV all day, and they sometimes will call those. And, I guess, for those listening to this podcast, if it's I would prefer to actually have a name and a face with someone that I can actually call and say, hey, I have a question about this. So that's why I like that personal approach and that actual relationship, that it's kind of hard to find those relationships these days. And that's why I vet people like you and other professionals so that I've already done the work, right? And that way you're not just, for the listeners, they're not just blindly calling that 1-800 number on the Medicare screen and say, okay, because who knows who you're talking to and how well they're trained and all that, and who's overseeing to make sure that they're doing the things the right way. This way, you've already got someone who this is their industry, this is their livelihood, and this is how they help people, is more of that one-on-one coaching and consulting. And the other second thing, quick, before we close down, when we do aging planning, with comprehensive aging planning, the whole kit and caboodle, the whole package that families want, and we have the families look at their Medicare, look at their healthcare statements and stuff like that. There's a lot of times that our clients who are in their 80s, 90s, or 100s, they get a invoice or a bill in the mail and they just cut the check. It doesn't, they don't always
Right.
inquire to make sure that this is legit. And so just to be very mindful that if your parents are managing their own affairs, that's really great. But just it's a good idea to just make sure that the healthcare provider has the right updated insurance information, and that they didn't put the wrong ICD-10 code on that healthcare statement, and maybe your insurance would have covered that procedure. So it's, you always, I hate to say that, but we always have to just double check things because people make mistakes. And, with a volume of procedures and surgeries
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff, doctor's appointments, mistakes are going to be made. And that again is that can be thousands of dollars. Just 2 weeks ago, we were looking at some hospital claims from, one of our local hospitals, and they billed our client $15,000. And I'm like, no, that's not right. But the client was about ready to pay it because that generation
Sure.
doesn't like to have, outstanding bills. They're going to cut the
Right.
check. And I'm like, no, this isn't right. And so it was a coding mistake. And so
Error
we got
can
that
be.
fixed. But if they would have paid that 15,000, they would have just been out that, so we have to gently intervene to make sure that we're safeguarding and advocating for our seniors and vulnerable adults. So this was so great. I'm going to have you back on when you have a chance to give us some of those updates on what's changing with Medicare, so that families can be informed and make smart decisions and kind of know what the lay of the land is with insurance right now.
I don't think there's any doubt that there are going to be ongoing changes.
Yes.
And the fact is that it has changed in the 10 years since the very first edition of my book, Maximize Your Medicare, to now. In fact, the conclusions are quite different
Sure.
today than they were then.
Yep.
I will not be surprised that over time, given the number of people that are Medicare beneficiaries, 65 million people in the United States have the federal red, white, and blue card. That number's going to go higher, which means that there are going to have to be changes as the government grapples with high healthcare costs and the fact that it is supporting 65 million people.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a small number, and people are expensive as we age, So
Absolutely.
how can people reach you, Jay? What's the best way for people who want to learn more from you? What's the best way for them to reach you? And we'll also put that in the podcast link when we send this out. But for those that might be listening to this right now, what's a good way to get reached?
Well, certainly those persons who are already in touch with CareRight or are going through yourselves, Anna Lee, you know how to get directly in touch with me, and you're absolutely welcome to stay in the loop. For other people who want to know more about Medicare generally or healthcare cost planning generally, Maximize Your Medicare is the official website to the published book And then GH2 Benefits.com is the full suite of different types of explanations about the number of different financial options that people have planning wise for themselves. And in there's for, offers for newsletters, et cetera, to keep up to date in a changing world.
Yep. Excellent. And then they can also just work with you directly too, if they want a consultant, right?
That is right, Annalee.
Yeah.
And the way that works is simply we'll happily accept the commercial risk of the fact that you may have your particular case may take 100 hours or 2 hours. We'll take the risk. We don't charge by hour. We have a flat fee, soup to nuts, if you will. We'll just tell you precisely what we think about your situation, what the options are, and from there, I absolutely believe the point here, the reason for the book, is to empower the consumer so they can choose for themselves.
Yep. Very good. All right, Jay, this was amazing. You're a wealth of knowledge. And hopefully this message hits home for the listeners or the viewers. And just, Jay he's the Medicare specialist. I'm the hub. And then when we identify where families need to go next or behind the scenes with what we're doing, that way we can connect clients to you as well. So anyway, thank you for your time, your expertise, and good luck with your book. I'm an author too. I get it. That is quite the commitment to do that. So
My privilege to be here with you today, Annalee. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Care Right podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, Care Right is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.